I had my son so young, we lived with my parents for the first couple of years of his life. And when we did move out of their house, we actually got a house 10 houses away from theirs. So my son has always been extremely close to my parents because they've always been a huge part of his life. They've always been extremely active in his life. And when it came to my dad specifically, he was always one of the boys. He was always wanting to do the kid shit with the kids, okay? So when my son became a teenager and he wanted to start hanging out with his friends more, no big deal for my dad whatsoever because he would just hang out with them too. And so, like, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, my dad started this tradition accidentally where he would take my son and his friends to Haunted World every year. Haunted World is like this spooky haunted corn maze where I live that happens in September and October. And so, for the first weekend that it opens up every single year, all the boys would meet at my house. My dad would come out here and he would pick them all up and he would take them to Haunted World, where my father, a 50-something-year-old man, would go running around with all these teenage boys away from people chasing them through a corn maze with like hatchets and chainsaws and shit, okay? And so, because my dad did this type of stuff with my son and all his friends, they all became really close to my dad and they all called him Pocket because that's what my son called him. I have no idea why my kids called my dad Pocket, but at this point, everybody calls my dad Pocket. And in June, my dad was hit and killed by a negligent truck driver. And when this happened, my son and his friends all went to my dad's funeral in Harley shirts in his honor because he was a big biker. Anyway, here's a photo of the boys who have to go to Haunted World this year without Pocket because some guy decided to not make any attempts to yield at a flashing yellow turn. My uncle was sentenced to 29 to life in prison when I was a baby, but he actually ended up getting out when I was in my third year of college. Now, while these years were overlapping, these years being the years that I was in college while my uncle was in a maximum security prison in California, he actually was introducing me to some other criminals that he had met and befriended while he was in prison. He did this so that I could interview them, ask them questions, research them, gather information from them that I could use for my classroom assignments and projects, stuff like that. Honestly, I did a lot of projects on the genealogical factors for criminal behavior and the family history of criminals. And out of all the people my uncle ever let me speak to while he was in prison, only one of them ever got out of prison, found me on social media, and sent me a friend request. And that was this guy named Kevin. I refer to him as Kevin the Cannibal. You can guess why I refer to him as Kevin the Cannibal. And I made a video about him in June because that morning I had woken up, I had opened Facebook, and on the top of my feed was a photo Kevin had taken of himself and posted. He was wearing a clown mask. He was in formal wear. He had edited the background so it was unicorns, rainbows, sunshine, stuff like that. And then he had the Reading Rainbow theme song playing. And that video went super viral on here to the point that people were literally taking that picture of Kevin and turning it into their profile picture and stuff. But I got so many comments and messages from people who were concerned for my life because they thought Kevin was going to eat me, even though I clarified in that video that he does not like to eat people who have been tattooed. He does not like the taste of that, and I am a very heavily tattooed person. But I still got a lot of concerns for people who thought that he was going to skin me alive or something. So I just wanted to come out here and let everybody know that I am 100% safe because that was the last photo Kevin ever got to take of himself because he passed away shortly after he posted that without getting to know that he was mega viral on TikTok over it. Recently submerged in my local horse community, and that is a wild place to be. There's some crazy shit going on in there. I inherited a bunch of horses. My dad was just killed. He had a fuck ton of horses, and there are a few horses that I am prioritizing trying to sell very quickly because they need to go to new homes where they can be properly taken care of. And I heard the best place to do that is in the horse community group. So I joined one and I listed them for sale for super cheap. And I'm getting a ton of messages, but I got one yesterday that was super weird. It was some guy asking a ton of questions, but his questions were not about the horses I was selling. They were about my father, my dead father. And I was like, what the hell? So I just did not respond to that. Then he sent me another message and was like, it won't let me add you. So I ignored that because why are you trying to add me? And then he commented on my post and was like, respond to my messages, which I ignored yet again. And then he commented again and said that he was an investigative journalist. And then I get a message from some other girl within the same horse group. And she's like, hey girl, I just wanted to reach out to you because I know that you're new to the horse community and you don't know much about what's going on or the people within this community. So I just wanted to give you a heads up not to reply to Doug's messages. Doug is the guy who's sending me all these weird messages. She's like, he's known within the community to have some problems. There's something not quite right going on with him. And he is convinced that the people within this community are being killed so that their family members can sell off their horses. This guy has this whole conspiracy going on about deaths of people within the horse community being murderers, them being murdered so that other people can profit off of their horses and all this crazy shit. Like, are you messaging me because you're implying that I killed my father? I had nothing to do with my father's death. I was in Vegas and I know who killed my father. My father's death had absolutely nothing to do with the horse community, it had nothing to do with his horses. It had everything to do with a 70-year-old man who had a history of driving under the influence and should not have had his license. I convinced my friend that her mom was this kidnapped baby that I saw on a missing child poster online. I've told this story on here before, but basically what happened was she mentioned that her mom was adopted, and that did not make any sense to me because I had known her mom and grandma for years, and I had listened to her mom tell the horror stories about the unstable, like unsafe environment that she grew up in and how terribly she was treated by her mother. And I knew my friend's grandma, and she was absolute fucking nutcase. This lady was a lifelong alcoholic who worked part-time at a liquor store. She never had the means or the lifestyle that would have been approved for any sort of legal adoption. So I knew the absolute only ways that this lady could have gotten a baby would have been if she had had it herself, which she claimed wasn't possible. She said she could not have biological children, or if she kidnapped somebody else's baby. She would have had to stolen that baby. So I went through all of these kidnapped child posters, and I looked for these specific dates around when my friend's mom was born and looked around that area, and I found one that I thought matched pretty well. I took it to my friend, and I convinced her that was her mom. Then I convinced her to take a DNA test to prove that my theory was right, and when the DNA came back, it proved that my theory, in fact, was not right. That was not her mom, but she did match her mom's biological dad on there. He immediately reached out and explained that when he was a teenager, him and his high school sweetheart ended up getting pregnant, and they were raised extremely religious. Actually, the biological mom's dad was a priest at a Catholic church, and he did not want people finding out that his daughter was pregnant out of wedlock, so he arranged with another Catholic church to take the baby and adopt it out to a family within that church. But that is not what that church did. That church sold that baby to the highest bidder, which happened to be Winnie the alcoholic, who had a couple $1,000s from her dad passing away, and she spent it all to buy this baby because she was trying to keep a man who wanted children when she could not have biological children of her own. He ended up leaving anyway, and then she resented her daughter over it and did not take care of her properly, and that's why my friend's mom had such a bad childhood. But it turns out that her biological parents ended up getting married still right after college. They had more children, so she had full siblings out there. She had this whole family out there that had been looking for her all this time, and so now she is actually super close to her biological family, and all of her full siblings were just in town to visit her recently, and they just learned that the reason why they have their sister in their life right now is because like 8 years ago, I convinced my friend that her mom was a kidnapped baby I saw on a poster online. The guy who killed my dad was found financially judgment proof. He's still criminally responsible for my father's death, so he will still go to jail for killing my dad. We just cannot legally force him to pay any of the medical bills that he created when he killed my dad, because my dad did not die on the scene. He was life flighted to the hospital, then he spent 10 days on a ventilator on 24/7 dialysis. He was on life support for a while. He underwent about a dozen surgeries, and then ultimately he passed away due to complications from all of the internal damage that his organs took from the blunt force trauma of this man speeding through a flashing yellow light that he did not have the right of way on and making no attempts to yield before smashing into my dad, who was on a motorcycle at the time. And since my dad passed away, my mom's gotten about $13 million worth of hospital bills in the mail so far, and I'm sure she's going to get even more than that. And my dad's insurance is like, hey, we are not going to pay this. He was not at fault in any way for this. You need to get the money from the other guy's insurance. The other guy's insurance is like, yeah, he is at fault for this. He definitely killed him, and we will pay you the maximum from his insurance policy. It's $50,000. $50,000 is how much it costs to life flight my dad to the hospital. That does not cover any of the $13 million in hospital bills that we have gotten so far. So everybody's like, oh, you just need to sue him so you can make him responsible for all those bills. That's not how it works. This is a civil issue. So yes, we can sue him. Our attorney can sue him, and he will 100% win a wrongful death lawsuit against him. We will win millions of dollars for that and for all the hospital bills, but we will never receive a penny from this man. He is judgment proof. He has no garnishable wages. He works in landscaping, which he does under the table. It's not done through an LLC. It is all done for cash, so there is no way to garnish any of that income. He has no assets of any value for the state to take away from him. There is absolutely no way for us to pry even a dime out of this man's hands to pay for this. So yeah, we can win. We can spend $40,000 on a lawsuit against him, win millions of dollars, and we will never see a dime from him. It's just like throwing money in the garbage at this point. Mom made a video yesterday talking about how her dad was killed in the 90s, and it was the worst experience of her entire life. Not just her dad being killed, but dealing with the justice system in its entirety because of how fucked up it is and how fucked up it is to the victims' families. And she was talking about how while she was going through that entire experience, the one thing that she was holding on to that was getting her through it was the fact that this was a once in a lifetime experience. This was something she was never going to have to go through again, so she just had to get it done this one time and move on. Now, unfortunately for my mother, my dad got killed last month, so it in fact was not a once in a lifetime experience for her. She gets to go through it all over again, except for this time she is going through it as the victim's wife instead of the victim's daughter. So now, while she gets fucked over by the justice system for a second time, she is holding on to the fact that at least she did not get arrested for the murder this time. Good for you, Mom. The bar is quite literally in hell. But while I was watching my mom's video about this, this, I read her caption and I noticed she spelled the word slaughter wrong in her caption. So, like the kind daughter that I am, I commented on my mom's video and I was like, you spelled the word slaughter wrong. And then some girl came to my profile, watched my most recent video, which starts out with, don't call me a horse girl, but I'm going to tell you my dead dad's horse drama. Then she goes back and she replies to me on a video of my mom talking about how my dad got killed and said, shut the fuck up, horse girl. I was in some of the pictures on some of the fan sites and memorial sites for some people in Elvis Presley's family, and people have been stumbling upon it lately and then commenting on my videos asking if I knew that she was in those photos and also asking why she's in those photos. So yes, I did know my grandmother was in those photos. My grandma was a huge scrapbooker, so I had copies of them already, but I stumbled on them online a couple years ago, and she is in those photos for the exact same reason that her tits are in photos that are featured in museums, why she is in paintings, why she is on calendars, why she is in magazines, why she is on pins and buttons. She was the main character in her life. She was literally doing absolutely everything that she wanted to do. When she decided that she was going to do something, she went all in on that. She had to be like the best at everything. So one day she decided that she was Elvis Presley's #1 fan, and she started an Elvis Presley fan club, and this fan club went global. Like, it blew up. She was on the news and everything for this fan club in her Elvis Presley collection. And then from that, she somehow met his Aunt Lorraine, and she became really good friends with his Aunt Lorraine, and that's how she met the other people in his family. And then she also met this guy named Jimmy Velvet. I'm not sure who that is. He was some sort of popular musician back then, but for whatever reason, he was having custom jewelry made for my grandma. And so now I have a bunch of custom jewelry made by some guy named Jimmy Velvet that he made for my grandma, even though my grandparents have been married since my grandma was like 18 years old. I live in the Treasure Valley in Idaho, and we have a lot of those local community pages on Facebook where you can just go to post anything that you need to share within the community. You can post about things you have for sale. You can post about events that are upcoming. You can really post anything that you just want to spread around the community quickly. And yesterday a woman went in there and she posted about something concerning that happened to her at her local Walmart that she wanted to share with all of the other local women so that they didn't end up in the same situation as her. And she was talking about how she was just doing her normal shopping when a strange man approached her and complimented her nail polish. She thanked him and told him what shade it was, and he asked if he could take a photo of it. She agreed to this, but instead of taking a photo of her hands, he bent down and took a photo of her feet because she was wearing sandals and she had the same color nail polish on her toes that she had on her hands. She was so caught off guard by this happening that she didn't know what to do or say, so she just allowed it to happen. And then when it was over with, she walked away, but then she started feeling uncomfortable with that interaction because she thought maybe the random man that approached her at the Caldwell Walmart might have had some ill intentions with taking those photos of her toes. So she went and she reported it to the cashier, and then she hopped on the community pages so that she could warn all of the local women to not allow men at the Caldwell Walmart to take photos of their feet. And I just know that this woman had not lived in the Treasure Valley very long because nobody goes to the Caldwell Walmart with their dogs out. I come from a family of generational bikers. I could literally show you pictures of my grandparents and my great-grandparents on motorcycles. Actually, I'm going to. This is my great-grandma Eva. This is her daughter, my grandma Dolly, and my grandpa Ron. Also, here's my parents. So because I come from a family of generational bikers, they're all very safe riders and very cautious about everything. But regardless of how cautious you are riding, there are still negligent drivers out there. So they protect their family's future. And one of the things they do to do that is they all have accidental death policies. Now, luckily for my family, we've never had to use one up until recently when my father was hit and killed by a negligent driver last month. And my mom filed to get it. And they contacted her and they're like, well, we need a copy of his death certificate that shows that this was accidental. And so my mom sends them a copy of my dad's death certificate, which shows it was an accidental motorcycle versus truck accident and that my dad died from blunt force trauma complications. And then she messaged my mom back and was like, okay, well, now I need a copy of the police report so that I can see that he was not at fault for this accident. And my mom was like, oh, well, I don't have a copy of that because we don't let her have a copy of that. The police report has, somebody had a dash cam and they recorded my dad getting hit by a speeding truck. My dad flew off of his motorcycle with such force that his boots flew off of his fucking feet. Then the cops took like stills of that happening and they attached the photos of those stills into the police report. So there are literal photos of my father being shot through the fucking air in that police report. So we don't let my mom have a copy of it. And so she was like, okay, you need to contact my daughter. My daughter will give you a copy. So I sent her the copy of it. The copy includes all of this information. It also includes that the other guy is at fault. It is still an open criminal investigation because he's being charged with vehicular manslaughter for killing my father, right? And she was like, okay, this is great. Now I need a copy of the autopsy. Why the fuck do you need a copy of my dead dad's autopsy? You already have his death certificate that shows that he was killed in an accidental manner by blunt force trauma. You have a copy of the police report that shows that he was not at fault in any way for his death. Why on earth could you possibly need his autopsy? And she told me that it was because she needs to make sure that he wasn't under the influence of illegal substances at the time that he was killed. Why? He wasn't at fault for the accident. Also, my parents don't do drugs. My dad doesn't even fucking drink. I can tell you the last time that my dad has had a drink, actually, and it was 2016, a decade ago. We got off of a boat in Mexico. There was a guy standing there at a booth selling shots of tequila, and my husband convinced him to take a tequila shot with him for their first steps into Mexico. That was the last time that my dad had any alcohol. And she was like, well, we also need to check for any kind of medication that he could have been on at the time of the accident. My dad didn't die on the scene. He was life flighted to a hospital, and he was on life support and a ventilator where he underwent a dozen surgeries and was pumped full of pain medication because his organs were all slowly dying. He was in constant pain the entire time. So that report is going to show all the shit that was pumped into my dad so you can find an excuse to not pay it out. Like, this is absolutely fucking nuts. Allstate already told me that my dad's life was only worth $50,000 to them. Now, Omaha is trying to avoid paying out the accidental death insurance on an accidental death. At what point does the corporate greed stop and companies start caring about their customers again?